Hello again. I am Jared Case, Curator of Film Exhibitions at the Dryden Theater and the George Eastman Museum. And we're coming to you today with a special guest recommendation. I have with me today Mike White, who is the host of the Projection Booth podcast, as well as the editor of Cashiers Do Cinemart. He's put out a couple of collections of material writing from there. And he's going to bring us a new, old recommendation today. But first, Mike, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Well, the Projection Booth is, we are coming up on our 500th episode, though with specials and bonuses and stuff, I think it's over like 700. And then next March will be our 10th anniversary. We've been doing it every week, week in, week out for almost 10 years now. Every week we look at a particular film, try to put it in context, talk to some of the people behind it if we possibly can, or other supplemental interviews. And yeah, they just have a great time talking about one movie after another for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I did go back and listen to the episode on the recommended film for today. And I noticed it was in 2011, so it was one of the first episodes. And it surprised me that it had been going on for almost 10 years now, because when I first met you, it was before the podcast even existed.
Yeah, I was still doing Cashiers Do Cinemart at the time. And yeah, I was, the podcast, frankly, I didn't want to do it. It was a friend of mine that talked me into it. And luckily, he managed to land us two incredible guests for our first episode. We did an episode on the Stuntman, and we got Richard Rush and why am I blanking on Steve Railsback. Got both of them for our first episode. I was like, wow, okay. And then that just kind of set the bar, and then it's been up to me to keep it up there or to raise it if I possibly can.
Yeah, that was that you were hooked after that.
Yeah.
But
No, it's definitely kind of a thrill, especially when it comes to landing the interviews and figuring out who I can talk to. And then after my regular co-host left, we've been doing kind of a rotating thing of different co-hosts. You yourself have been on before, and it's always two different people, sometimes the same, but usually two different people. And I kind of set it up almost like a cocktail party where it's like, I hope these two people get together and get along, and we'll see how it goes. And most of the time it works out well, knock wood, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And then I've seen a lot of friendships come out of it, which is fantastic.
And your format is a little bit unique. As you say, it is a sort of a cocktail party, a very nerdy cocktail party, where these guests that you have on know a lot about the film already before you get together to talk about it. But it really is dependent on a lot of great interviews. And it's not just the regular episodes you do, but you do have additional special episodes that come up as well. Can you talk a little bit about the interviews and how that became sort of a crucial point of that format?
Yeah, like I said, that first episode really set the bar, and then since then it has just been trying to find as many folks as we possibly can. There are some episodes where it's just I always point to the Conan episode, which is 7 hours long. And that's because we've got so many interviews. And Conan the Barbarian is not just Conan the Barbarian. He's the Robert E. Howard books. He is Conan the Barbarian, the movie, the sequel, the remake. There's Red Sonja that's in there. So there's so many different angles that you can go at it with, and then able to talk to the gentleman that played Sudakai, talk to some people that run a Robert E. Howard podcast called the Chromecast. We've just got so many different folks that are involved with different aspects of Conan that the show exploded out into this massive thing. But one of my former co-hosts put it the best way, which is we're like Fight Club, where the episodes go on for as long as they have to.
Yeah. Yeah, and you do get actors, directors, writers on there, but you also invite academics, people that have written about these subjects. So you get another point of view from there. It's not just the production, but it's, as you say, the context and how it lives within our society now, particularly when you go back to some of the themes that you do, whether it's Czechtember or Noirvember, where you're going back in time and there really is a sense of a piece about them. That's why the theme is created, that there's more to it than just the film itself. It exists within another piece of history, which is part of the cinematic history.
Exactly. Yeah. And in these times, it's funny because I've gotten a lot of feedback of, stick to movies, you shouldn't bring politics into it. And it's just like, do you realize how political movies
Right.
are or can be? Do you remember the HUAC hearings? Do you remember, the Hays Code? Just all of these things that you were imposed onto films. And yes, there are things going on that aren't just, boy meets girl, boy loses girl. So there's definitely a lot of things happening with these. And yeah, I really appreciate the idea of the theme months and being able to work through these things, especially like this year we chose a month to talk about Cinema Novo, which I was completely unfamiliar with. So it was great. I got to just dive into what is Brazilian cinema, how did it change over the years, how did people like Glauber Rocha come in and just revolutionize it? Who were the other prominent figures that were involved in this? And then we went from the barren earth all the way up to the lion has seven heads. So we're able to look at about 10 years of cinema and just to see how it changed, see how important the revolution of 66 was to the film industry there. It was just really wild and just it was so fulfilling to me, and I hope it was fulfilling to the audience as well, because I don't think too many people are talking about Cinema Novo in 2019, which 2020 now, which they really should.
Yeah, and it fits in perfectly with what we're doing at the Dryden with this repertory approach to cinema and rediscovering things that people should know about. That's not just the canon, but the fact that it's film has been used as a medium for 125 years across the world for many different types of films. So it's
Mhm.
great to have a resource like you out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Same to you, sir.
So, as I said, one of the first podcast episodes that you did was about a film that has a very dear spot in your heart. So, I'd like you to introduce it for us.
The film is called Crime Wave. I was introduced to the film by a friend of mine, Skiz Sizik, who ran the Microcinefest down in Baltimore. And he told me about this movie and tried to explain it to me. Are the dogs too much?
No, that's fine.
Okay. My wife's coming home, so now the dogs are going crazy. Um, and just even the way he told me about the movie was confusing because the name of the movie is Crime Wave, but it was released on VHS as The Big Crime Wave, which adds to the kind of noir overtones to it, the big this, the big that. And what makes it even more confusing is it was released in 1985, the same year that Sam Raimi's Crime Wave was released. So that's why they stuck the big on it on the video. And then when you watch it, there's a beautiful title card, all handmade title cards by the writer director star John Paizs. And the video company slapped a horrible chyron of the big over the title card. But if you watch it now on Amazon Prime or IMDb TV, they don't have the big on there anymore. It's just Crime Wave. And it is the story of Stephen Penny, who is played by the writer director John Paizs, who was one of many filmmakers that came out of the Winnipeg film scene of the 1980s. Most people are familiar with Guy Madden, uh, Greg Tolles. There are a whole host of folks that came out of that. Greg Tolles is actually in the film. I think he was a producer as well. He plays I know you just watched this. He is the one of the very um, let's say country people who are driving a pickup truck that eventually gets hijacked by their dog. So that's Greg Tolles in his cameo role there. But yeah, it's or sorry, Greg Tolles. I'm saying that, and I actually mean Greg Klimke. I apologize for that. Um, and who also is a filmmaker and has done a few films as well. So yes, it's the story of Stephen Penny, who is a very frustrated writer, and it's great because the story, it takes place mostly in Stephen's mind through the writings that he has. Well, I guess it's through Stephen's mind, but it's also through another person's mind. It is a young girl who owns the house where Stephen is staying over the garage, very happy day situation. And she reads the beginnings and endings of all of these different scenarios that he types out, but he is great at beginnings, he's great at endings, but he can't figure out the middles. And the
Mhm.
whole movie is like a deconstruction of how difficult it is to be a creative person and knowing where you want to start and where you want to end, but how do you get to point A to point from point A to point B?
Yeah, it's and I think you mentioned it at some point in time that when Skiz told you about this, he couldn't exactly describe it to you. And even though you've been introducing it for a while, you still don't sort of get a sense of what it's about, at least in terms of a narrative. It's very, I hate using this prefix as a word, but it's part of our culture now. It's very meta in terms of what it is doing, as you say, talking about creative people and the struggles that they have just to get through that one thing, let alone to produce multiple things throughout. So I love the way that it starts out as a narrative, the narrative of the film that he's writing, but it becomes a narrative of him struggling through how to complete exactly what that is. And he goes through many, many starts and stops. The first one that we see is a comparison of tribute acts. That
Yes.
was his first idea, where coming from the north is this Elvis Presley impersonator, which he doesn't mention by name because he doesn't want to, but it's him versus Hank Williams versus
Sid Vicious.
Sid Vicious, right? And so he's got this setup, and he knows that there's something there, but he can't exactly describe what that is or where he wants to go with it.
Right, but then he's got the perfect ending for poor Ronnie Boyles, the Elvis impersonator. And his legacy, especially his face smashed into a telephone pole.
Right.
There's a lot of really great morbid humor in the film, and that's what I love about it. Is just so twisted. And Stephen Penny himself is not a normal person. He doesn't say a word through the entire film. He lets his writing do his speaking for him. And when he gets invited to a party in the middle of the film, he comes as a mad bomber, and everyone just moves away from him wherever he goes. It's just, yeah, the only person that seems to understand him is the little girl. I think she's what, 14 years old, and she's the only person that can really latch on to his creativity and is so engaged in trying to make him into a better writer, so much so that she finds a script doctor, Dr. Jolly, down in Texas, who specializes in middles. So she takes Stephen, puts him on a bus to send him to Dr. Jolly, only to find out that Dr. Jolly isn't necessarily the best script doctor in the world.
Let alone other things.
Yes.
But the key to everything is twists.
Yes, that's it. And once you get those twists in there, then you know that you can have a good middle.
So I'd like to ask you about why this is not a better known film, but within that, I think what I'd also like to point out is that I think we've touched on the writing, how Paizs approached the writing of this and the multi-layered narratives that he's using. But also I want to mention that it's such a low budget film, but the camera work that he's doing, the camera tricks, he obviously knows what he's doing with the camera, whether it's the shot at the beginning where uh, the young girl is looking at Penny in the window above the garage, and it's lit so perfectly. You know, you're not getting any reflection or anything. He knew exactly what he was doing with the camera and the camera angles and how to move it and how to place it. It's surprising that there's so much imagination that went into not only the writing but the production of the film, that it is not better well known. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the production itself and how he came to where he was with the production of this film.
Well, Paizs had made several short films, and short films ranging from some small animations that he was doing to so there's a lot of his artistry. He was an animator to start with, and would go on to make shorter and then longer and longer films. One of, I can't say better known because not many of his films are better known, but one of his more available films is one called Springtime in Greenland, which is about a half an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good point for him before he moved into a feature to do Crime Wave. And one of the interesting things about Crime Wave is that it showed at Toronto, I think in 85 at the Toronto Film Festival, the Festival of Festivals it was called back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't go over very well. This movie actually had a different ending than the ending that you saw. It doesn't necessarily go the same way that it was. So probably right around, oh gosh, I guess about right around the 70-minute mark, it actually went in a different direction. And Paizs knew that it didn't go over as well as it should have. So he went back to the drawing board and redid that entire ending. So the all of the stuff of Stephen Penny's rise and all of these things, you know, I really did wish I could be better. All of that stuff is completely new. And so not a lot of people saw that. You know, he had his festival premiere and then didn't really go very many places from there. He went back to the drawing board, did up this whole thing, and then there really wasn't a market for it. He never got picked up by anybody, and he didn't do another feature film for many, many years until he got hired to do one called Top of the Food Chain, which is released in the United States as Invasion. And that's another film which is just fantastic. You've got Tom Everett Scott and Campbell Scott as, you know, your two main characters, and the humor in it is so on point. It's amazing to just pick up the jokes because they just keep coming and coming and coming. To realize probably about 20 minutes into the movie that every single male character has a female name in the film. It's great, from Dr. Carol Lamont, you know, but I think there's one person named Guy, and that's it, and then everybody else has, you know, female names. And yeah, just it's a great alien invasion film. He worked on some Canadian television. He did the, I think it was the pilot for the Once a Thief television show. He was also very involved with the Kids in the Hall and would do a lot of the shorter films for Kids in the Hall. So, like Mr. Heavyfoot was one of his things. So, he was involved in a lot of stuff, but he was just always kind of like behind the scenes. And much like Stephen Penny, he's a quiet man. But I've had the opportunity to meet Paizs a few times. He is so generous, so nice, and it just kills me that his films aren't better known because they are just so fun to watch.
Yeah, it's not a film. It's a film that I think does get better with context. So if you go in knowing that this is off the wall bonkers, you're going to be much more accepting of it than I think if you went at it from a Hollywood standpoint.
Oh yeah,
You need to know that not all of it's going to make sense, but if you go with the ride, it's a lot of fun.
it's very dry. It gives you more. The more you watch this film, the more you get out of it. Just some of the little subtle things that he puts in there, to see how he takes these characters that he creates inside of the openings and endings, and then manipulates them and has them recast throughout the rest of the film. Years and years ago on the Carol Burnett show, there was a skit where it was characters that are kind of waiting for the writer, and the writer's having them do different things, and they're getting really angry about what the writer is having them do. This film reminds me a lot of that.
Mhm.
It's this idea of these same characters, these same actors that are kind of being recast as they go through. So you can see Ronnie Boyles in other things. You can
Right.
see the couple that sell the Amway products, how they're recast throughout the film. It is really interesting to just see how he manipulates that. Even to see that Dr. Jolly himself is there as the Hank Williams impersonator.
Mhm.
So it's very, very well done. And like I said, the more times you watch it, the more you get out of it. And I've probably seen the film at least, I don't know, 3 dozen times, if not more, because it is just it really works, and it's just so much fun. And just even to watch that opening, the whole from the north sequence, and just the way that the film kind of restarts a few times until it finally gets to the narrative, it could be, to your point, very frustrating, especially if you don't know why this movie's doing it. But if you walk in going, okay, it's going to take about, what, 15, 20 minutes before I finally get to the meat of this film. But gosh, the ride is so much fun.
Yeah, to the point where these fictional characters that he's created actually interact with each other uh, in a sequence where they're arguing and not getting along because
Right.
they all want to have primacy in this story. So that's sort of the level you're getting to with this film.
The joke that gets me so much is when she's looking through the pages and there's one story where one of the characters just starts bashing his head on the floor, and then she flips pages, flips pages, flips pages, and then goes back to it, and he's still bashing his head on the floor. So good, so good. And then, as you know, a fan of films, you know, you were probably like me, looking around Stephen Penny's apartment and seeing all of these amazing posters for
Right.
stuff. Oh, it was so good. That is a treat, and you know that he's pulling from these things, and you know the idea, the name of the film, The Big Crime Wave, or Crime
Mhm.
Wave, going back to the Andre Dutau film, you know. But he's got that level of respect for stuff. And then when you look at some of the ephemera inside of the movie, just how well designed it is. You know, looking at the Color Crime Quarterly magazine that he
Yeah.
has, the postcards, especially during the Stephen Penny, you know, triumph moment, how he looks so much like Walt Disney, you know, just all of those things just really add to the level. And you would never think that this is a low budget film because it just looks so darn good, to your point from earlier.
Yeah, yeah. He's put so much thought into everything, and it's basically a one-man show from
Yeah.
conception and writing to production to shooting and editing. There was, I think, a story where actually he had gotten some funding or had borrowed some equipment from the National Film Board in Canada, and there's a mishap which actually made it into the film as part of the story of how the equipment got damaged became a part of the script and of the film.
Yes. Yeah, some of the behind the scenes stories, there's a really good, it's not Scanners level. If we're talking Canadian films, it's not up to Scanners level, but there's a really good head explosion in the film as
Yeah.
well. And to hear about how that went down, yeah, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, most of the film you could expect to get maybe a PG or PG-13 rating. There's probably some swearing in there that just washes over my head now. But every once in a while, you get that in the same sort of spirit, that manic. Oh, here's a little bit of nudity, or here's some gore. Here's a foot that's laying on the ground,
Right.
just to
Yeah.
throw in and keep you off balance again, because the next thing that's coming is going to go in a completely different direction. But again, it's all that same narrative. It's all about Penny going from a struggling writer to a successful artist.
Exactly. Yeah, this is up there with those films of people struggling for their creativity. This is another Barton Fink, it has that Barton Fink feel, you know.
But 5 years
um,
earlier.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the what was I going to say? Oh, I wanted to say real quickly that if you enjoy the film and you want to know about more about it, there is the episode, but there was a book written solely on crime wave by an author named Jonathan Ball, and it is very similar to the BFI or Devil's Advocates type books, where it's just a small little thing, but man, is that jam packed with just so much information. It is really wild. And of course, he put that out a few years after the episode. So luckily I was able to get in touch with Mr. Ball and have him come on and do an interview about it. So, but man, it's really good. And one of the things that has been a real sticking point for this film is that it's kind of in this murky area of rights,
Right.
because it eventually got sold to, I think wasn't Cineplex Odeon. I can't remember the whole pedigree of where the film went to, but I've actually contacted the people that own the rights to it, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like, it's on your website. You actually have a PDF, a really horrible PDF of the big crime wave out there. Let's see about getting the rights back. It's been restored now by the Film Board of Canada, and it's being sold on DVD, I think, possibly Blu-ray through the Winnipeg Film Group. But man, good luck trying to find it. It's very difficult to get your hands on a copy. When it showed up on Amazon Prime, I was completely blown away. Thank goodness that it is in this kind of murky gray area, and that Amazon doesn't seem to care about things that are in murky gray area. So we are now blessed to have the film available because Amazon doesn't care about the rights as much as, say, other people do. So I've been trying my best to try to get this out there. Like I said, tracking down the rights, trying to get a DVD company, one of the boutique labels interested in it. I almost had it sold to one company, but they said that there weren't enough boobs in it. So really wish that Dr. Jolly had maybe like been a little bit more inventive in his in his teachings, but it is what it is.
Well, hopefully we can have other cinephiles who are watching these videos become aware of it and find out about it themselves, and then spread the word, proselytize for it.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ear.
Or to the internet.